Yes, good evening. I enjoyed reading this book. I took care of a parent with Alzheimer's disease, and I was amazed at how many times I came across something that you said. It was exactly the situation that I went to, and it was like it was just a shock. So that there are these universal truths and universal experiences from this area of Portugal that affect everyone, just human beings, no matter where they are. And I just wanted to mention one of them, and I think this was an important one. It says, and this is on page 24 in my copy, it says, "It is always worse at night when the sick become agitated and their families wake up and spend the night fearing that it might be their last. And if it isn't in the morning, they realize that they do not feel relieved." And that's one of those experiences where and you almost hate yourself in the morning for feeling that way, but it's just the reality of being being with someone who is sick in this particular way. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is on page 66 you had something here that you say that and this is when you're talking to the gentleman who lived in Angola for a while, and you say, "I wanted to ask him what it was like to be 80 years old, what it was like to reach the end of your life, if he had any regrets, if it had all been worthwhile, and if so, what exactly had been worthwhile." But instead, I always end up asking him about Angola, and then you go on from there. But those questions that you put in there are questions that so many of us have. And I think that I've come across people who I think you could ask those questions to, and you could they would be able to answer them. And I wondered if you came across anyone who you felt that you could be that frank on such a raw level with them, that you would feel comfortable asking it and that they would feel comfortable answering it.
Well, if you know Portugal and if you know the Portuguese, you'll know that it's not easy to ask anything directly. um, so um, I had to ask those questions in a different way. And maybe the way I found to ask those questions were actually to ask about the life. One of the things that I felt from the start is that if I was going to talk about these people's death, I would have to talk about their lives too. And that became important to me. And in a way, while talking about their lives, that's when it comes across how they feel at the end of their life, about what they lived and they didn't live, what regrets they have, because they will tell, I did this, but maybe I should have done differently, but I did it anyway. And it's okay, because then this happened. And this is how it comes across. I didn't find a lot of people that could speak so directly about it, although that old couple would talk about death as old people tend to, but in this kind of, at the same time, quite abstract way, and very worried about who was going to go first and what would I do if I stay alone. And so in a way, their worry was also about their last days. How was that going to happen? With most people, it was difficult to have such a straightforward conversation, because people do not want to die and they want to believe that they can live for a little longer, even if they know that they will not survive. They still want to believe that they have more time than eventually what they have. And I also had to be very careful about this, because these were people that were being followed by this healthcare team. And often they were in different stages of their their awareness and their own process of accepting their own end. And I didn't want to interfere with that. So I had to be careful about what I would talk or I wouldn't talk about. But I think what's interesting, I think that question kind of runs throughout the whole book. And it's interesting because a lot of people ask me, but why would you want to write about this? And you are so young. I was 35 when I did this trip. And I think so there's this idea that if you're young, you're not interested. But I think it's almost this idea that if you talk with people who lived so much and actually are at that stage in their lives, then they will have some wisdom to share with you that you can actually use before you get to be 80, right? So, but of course, this is also, and I think I have a sentence in the book about this. This is a bit of a literary idea about death. And then what you see, it's actually that people often don't have the time or even the health to actually be thinking about this and making these considerations about, did I live well? What can I now like say to my children before I go? What can I do to say goodbye, etc., etc. So often what I found is not what I had hoped to find, and that kind of wisdom. So, or maybe not so directly. So I had to search it in other things, in the way people talked about other stuff, like the more banal things, the way they act towards each other, and be attentive to that.